Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Respecting the Beer. My name is Gary Arndt. With me, as usual, are the mad scientists, the good doctors, Robert and Allison Fleshman.
He's actually not a Robert.
Right, we've covered that.
Yeah.
We covered that.
I didn't know that.
I fought with
he is officially Bobby.
with the thesis committee and the university to actually print Bobby on the dissertation.
Yeah. So his dad is
certificate.
Robert, and very common in the South. Instead of Junior, you become the nickname.
Yeah.
So he's
But what is on your birth certificate?
That's it.
Bobby.
Bobby.
Yeah, it's Bobby. It's a Southern thing.
That seems really redneck.
It happens in the South.
Yep.
More than you think. At least I just have one first name.
One thing
But you
I
have
will
two
say is
middle
that the
names.
name you pick for this establishment is a smashing success in one respect. You can easily Google it.
Yes, that's why. It's a made-up word.
Yes, there's no other McFleshmans
Nope.
anywhere, and
That was the intention.
It is Googleable, and,
It is
and there's no
Googleable.
confusion.
Yep.
Even Googleable is
And it's kind of a
Googleable.
ridiculous name. So it's kind of like, what is it, Smuckers? With a name like Smuckers, it has to be good. It's McFleshman's. We don't take ourselves seriously.
McSmuckers.
McSmuckers.
so in a previous episode, we talked about Saint Hildegard of Bingen, the woman who gave hops to the world. Actually, we don't know if she actually did, but she was the first one to write about it, so she kind of gets credit for it. The patron saint of beer and brewing. But today we're going to talk about the Hildy Pilsner, which is one of the beers you make here at McFleshman's. And why don't we start out with why you picked that for the name?
Ooh.
Why didn't you use Hildy, because it's associated with hops, with like an IPA? Why a Pilsner?
You want to take that? Or you want?
Sure. I think this, so the infamous to us, but no one else probably cares, our trip to Cincinnati to go buy the back bar, the big piece of stained glass in our tap room, Bobby and I had way too much espresso and came up with, I think, I'm counting it up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 of the names of our flagship beers in one 5-hour span. And Hildy, when we were talking about a Pilsner, it kind of rolls off the tongue. It's Hildy Pils. And there's that fun alliteration. But also, the beauty of the Czech Pilsner is that there's just a hint of hops that really distinguishes it.
Well, so IPA as we know it today, even as we knew it in England, those are hoppy beers for sure. But there was a time, and those are made with hops that have been sort of bred for their characteristics, intense characteristics sometimes. But before that, there were these hops that were called noble hops, and they were landrace varieties found in continental Europe. Tettnang, Mittelfrüh, Spalter, and then those are all German, Bavarian. But then if you go east of that, you find the most famous variety of all the hops in all of history, and that's the Saaz hops, S-A-A-Z. And they're a little bit flowery, a little bit earthy, a little bit spicy, but they're really delicate and they're not high in bitterness potential. They're really about all of those botanical attributes. And the Czechs are beer drinkers like no other, except maybe Wisconsin. And they have learned to make one of the most drinkable styles in all of history, and that's what the Czech Pilsner is. It's really built around this landrace, that means not bred to exist variety, the Saaz hops. And then they learn to grow barley and malt the barley, and then can refine their process to make a Pilsner style around it, and really birthed the industry as we know it today. The Pilsner is what so many styles have gone on to emulate for the last several hundred years.
So one of the fun parts about the Hildy is that her original name was going to be the Hildegard Pilsner. So her full name, well, not Hildegard of Bingen, but just Hildegard. And then her nickname was going to be Hildy Pils. But that got...
I love that alliteration.
I love that. It's so great. But it got lost in when we finally got around to the label and to selling it, that I don't think she's ever been known as Hildegard Pilsner. I call her that, but I'm kind of her mother.
Yeah.
But
Get back in here.
Right.
Hildegard Pilsner.
But
You should have named Jade that.
no.
I met someone who named their daughter, he's a brewer at Explorium in Milwaukee, named their daughter after our beer, which is named after Hildy. So his daughter's named Hildy.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I know. Inception.
Although we named her after a spacecraft. So
Shout out to Nick at Explorium.
anyway, but yeah, so the Hildegard Pilsner, aka the Hildy Pils. I don't know. I think also the Pilsner is such a good craft curious gateway beer. And I think if we go deep into the Hildegard's, the actual person's contributions, I mean, she was a mathematician, she was a botanist, she was a musician,
Refer to a 10-minute episode by Gary Arndt on
Yes.
Everything Everywhere Daily, I'm sure. I know that I've heard one
that come out
episode
yet?
based on that.
Oh, a while ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that the Pilsner is a lot of people can recognize a Pilsner. It's a light beer. It's an easy drinker. But
And you know, I wasn't going to talk about this, but really the story of Pilsner begins back with pale ale, the pale malt in England, and how people started to make these lighter kilned malts, and it developed the use of glassware to show off the color, and then you got fancier glassware and so on. And then Europe wanted a piece of that. And eventually, and more than I can put in front of you, because I'm not the historian here in this group, but the Germans and the Czechs would perfect that process further and make what we now call the Pilsner. And there's a Czech Pilsner there's a German Pilsner that goes alongside the story of the Czech Pilsner. And it should be said that the German Pilsner turns out to be a little drier, a little more minerally, and a little hoppier, and a little bit more bitter. And that may strike somebody as more akin to what we would think of as something like an IPA without some of the malt and some of the more fruity aspects. But then the Czech Pilsner is way more about the balance. It still has that intensity of hops, but it's got a lot more malt character and a lot more residual sugar. The chemistry of the water is a lot softer. And that's what made that region so famous and so makes these beers so drinkable. And right up to today, it's the most popular style in all of Europe. And you'll see people pour these out of Lucre faucets in the Czech Republic.
The Lucre faucet.
And I'm actually drinking right now our Munich Dunkel out of a Lucre faucet. It makes every beer look and taste amazing.
That's funny because it makes it look like it's a cask conditioner.
It does. And you know, we talk a lot about the English and the Coopers, the Republicans, and how much they treat their casks a certain way. But if you go to the Czech Republic, you find that there is an obsession with glassware, an obsession with how to pour these Pilsners like you will not find anywhere else in the world.
So I'm going to jump back to Gary's question, though, in that, so if we're going to name a beer Hildy, I mean, aside from the Hildy Pils, which is just fun to say, why would we choose the Pilsner as, if that's, the epic beer name? And I think if we really dive even deeper, we have a Czech-built system to brew the beer. So if we're going to have a flagship,
was that in our logic when we
Well, I'm wondering.
I
Surely
think not.
it
No,
was.
because I built this recipe before we knew our system.
No, we had the system because the system was rusted as all hell in the back warehouse where friends of ours would we took them in and they were
I swear
why
I
are
was
you building
brewing
a
this in
brewery?
14, which would have been years before we had the system.
Really?
Or maybe I was planning. Who knows? But
We need a lifeline to our friend.
Hopefully, yeah.
Good friend of ours from Oklahoma who lives in Appleton now. Hildy is the lifeblood for him. We brew it almost specifically for him too.
Most brewers will tell you that a Pilsner of some flavor is their favorite of some stripe.
Yeah. Anyway, but I wonder if that kind of.
Fun fact,
Oh.
Pilsner's named after the city of Pilsen,
Fun fact, yeah.
Ooh.
which is in western Czechia, the region known as Bohemia, which was also at different times German.
And we'll call this a Bohemian Pilsner, actually. We can be saying Czech Pilsner. But
And the first Pilsner was the Pilsner Urquell,
There
which
you
is
go.
still brewed today.
Absolutely.
And you'll see signs for that all over the Czech Republic.
yeah.
Isn't that who she's modeled after?
I mean,
Urquell?
every Pilsner is to some degree. I'm jumping forward, I have some notes here to say about this style, and diacetyl is one of those flavor notes of this style, as apart from a German Pilsner, which is not going to have that. So, you want to take diacetyl?
Yes. I will just eat it. Well, it's
Okay.
funny because I'm eating a lot of popcorn right
Yeah.
now because it's delicious.
Diacetyl is produced. The yeast produced the precursor to it during fermentation through the process of growth, and some strains of yeast are more prone than others. Yeah.
Before we get too far into that, let's take a step back and start with water.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think this is always a good
double ketone. It's fun.
place to always start with any of these beers that you brew.
Yeah.
So what are you doing special for the beer or for the water that you put into a Hildy?
Yeah, so I always pitch that these styles really began in these regions where their water profile really motivated all the ingredients and process. So Pilsner is famous for that. The water of Pilsen is extremely soft, meaning low in calcium, low in magnesium, low in carbonates too. And in Appleton, as opposed to Oshkosh, you're going to find we actually have really soft water. And this was
Is it seasonal though?
the seasonality does increase the calcium because of the different road salts that are used and how that does get into our water supply. But by and large, even at its worst, it still makes for a low mineral water, one in which you can build it without adding any salts whatsoever. We will strip it through, as with every beer, we run it through a carbon filter, and that takes out anything sulfurous or some of all your chlorine and all your chloramines, which have negative effects on flavor, of course, but also yeast performance and maybe how your stainless steel performs. So long story short, Appleton is a pretty damn good place to build a brewery and not have to go through the energy-intensive process of reverse osmosis, which would be to strip every ion out of your water. We've explored that, and we may well explore that further in the future, where we strip half of it to even get it softer. But if you were going to build a brewery, this is a pretty good place to build it without having to strip those ions to start with. We just don't add any back. Now, you do have to have enough calcium, and this is something people should be aware of. The groundwater and the brewing water are not the same thing. If people think they go over to Pilsen or wherever they test it, and, oh, that must be the brewing water. Not true, because because they're not held by the constraints of Reinheitsgebot, they can add that stuff today, and they may well. And the process by which they treat the water itself allows them to precipitate ions out even further. It may be the other extreme. So you're looking at me.
I was just going to laugh at you because I don't think that I've ever walked upon like a water source and thought, this must be the brewing water.
Right. Well, that's the thing. People don't really know what these beers, like a Pilsner or Urquell water supply, looks like. They know what the groundwater looks like, but they don't know what they do to it once it gets inside the brewery. So be careful when we preach what it is or isn't, because it may be different than we expect.
Especially if you find yourself in a position that you have to make these decisions and then be careful, that's pretty impressive.
Brewers are always obsessed with water. Gary's not wrong. You start with a thing that's 95% of the ingredients. So, but the yeast need a little bit of calcium. You can't put them none in there or they won't perform. I'm saying it out loud and having this light bulb moment in real time. If you don't have enough calcium, you don't have enough what we call attenuation, conversion of those sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. And it may well play into why these beers end up with residual sugar and give you some of that body that makes it balance so well with these hops.
It's a good limiting reagent problem in my chemistry course.
And backing up on Hildy, if you're going to name any beer made with hops after someone who's famous for having been the botanist behind this use, Pilsner's the one to go with. It is hoppy, it is balanced, it is the top of the mountain as far as difficult beers to make, and if you ask a lot of brewers.
So then what are you using for grain?
Yeah, so there's these. We use all Czech malt and Czech ingredients in our beers, except for the water, of course. And what happens is they'll take a locally grown variety of barley, and then they'll lightly kiln it, and they do it on the floor. And whereas if you go to like a modern malting facility, they'll do it in these malt houses that have vents, and they have automatic pneumatic machines that turn the malt over. This is the thing you'll see in the Czech Republic that they've done forever, is that they manually turn the grain over on the floor. There's no vents below. And so it sort of results in some stratification and some more character in these malts that you really can't replicate in any other way. So you have to go the distance if you want to make a Czech Pilsner, and not only use malts that are grown there, but you have to use malts that are what we call floor malted. They're more expensive. They're more.
I had no idea that you imported the
absolutely
ingredients for this.
every pound. With the name of our maltster is.
This is why we were doing this.
Exactly. It's a Prosciugot, I think is the name. Prosciov. There it is. Prosciov is the name of the maltster. It's Prostegov. And they make all of our floor malt that we use in this beer, and we cannot get it any other way. We can't get the attributes we're looking for any other way. We've played around with it, both in the flavor perception and or profile, but also in that residual sugar.
How many beers do you do that for?
Import the malt specifically for?
I think all the German ones.
All German. We split that between a few different Salzgitter, Best Malts, Weiermann, and then on the Czech side we have a few that we supply from. And then all English, same way. We use Thomas Fawcett, Baird's Crisp. We use Belgian malts for all of our Belgian beers. Yeah, we're very authentic. We go the distance on all this. We'll get into all that over the series, I'm sure, but yeah, you have to start with and you don't mess around with the recipe of a Pilsner. You don't then go say, oh, let's dump this malt for this and that malt for the other. You have to celebrate that one ingredient. And that one ingredient on the malt side is that Pilsner. And then the other thing that we are celebrating is the Saaz hops. And we'll tend to use an American-grown Saaz hop as well because we're looking for sometimes a bittering that we could use the Czech-grown Saaz for, but you're going to use an inordinate amount of it because it's low in that bittering potential. So we'll use an American version, which is it's called Sterling. It's a beautiful variety. And it allows us to not dump too much vegetal matter into the beer and kill that balance while also getting that amount of bitterness that we're looking for. When you run these through UV spectroscopy, you can measure the bitterness, and you'll find these beers are just as bitter as an IPA. It's just that there's so much sweetness and so much malt backing it up. That's the beauty of a Pilsner, striking that balance.
I was going to ask, has Hildy won a medal? I don't think she...
No, but she was showcased in Craft Beer and Brewing. She got, I think, a 98 out of 100 in that magazine. It's one of the most respected. It's a magazine. It's not a scientific journal, but... It was fun to see that. We'll probably submit her.
Why don't you have that on the walls here?
We should get that.
Because we're stupid, Gary. That's why.
Well, I was just thinking all the things.
God. Frame, picture.
Yeah, it's a really great magazine. It's shout out to those guys. It's great content. Yeah, we won it, and we said cool, and we threw it in the corner. I know. I'm watching Gary's face.
Megan has business success.
Can we get to the word spooned? Are we ready for that?
Spunding.
Decoction we've covered ad nauseum, but decoction's involved in this too. In fact, in the Czechs, they don't even have a word for decoction. That's just malting. That's just mashing, and that's just brewing for them. Our system, as Allison said, was built in the Czech Republic, and so we decoct a lot of our beers. It would be a shame that our Czech Pilsner didn't get decocted.
Hildy's decocted, though, right?
Yeah, it is decocted. Absolutely. I mentioned the noble hops.
What is spunding?
I'll get to that.
Because when we started, you said that you spun her, and I didn't understand
we'll
what
jump
that meant.
to that.
You spooned her.
So, okay, so let's see. Gary mentioned Pilsner Urquell, which I have great memories of Pilsner Urquell. It has that, I jumped back to that diacetyl comment I made earlier. It makes this buttery note from fermentation. Pilsner Urquell's famous for that. And it gives you a sort of a slickness, sort of mouthfeel that you're looking for in these beers. But it can get to be a little overwhelming if you don't control that production of diacetyl or the precursor of. But spunding is meant for a couple of reasons. Spunding is really simple. You normally let it's a German word. You normally let a tank ferment, and then when it's finished, it stops making alcohol and carbon dioxide, and then you close the valve that it's releasing the CO2 from, and then you might go exogenously introduce CO2 through these sintered stones, and you carbonate your beer. But the Germans don't allow that. They don't allow you to put CO2 into the beer. That's an ingredient that's against the Reinheitsgebot. So you have to learn to use the CO2 that's made by the yeast. So you have to know when and how to close the valves. You don't want your tank to be overpressurized. That's really dangerous. But you don't want to have it underpressurized if you wait too long. So there's an art to this. But I'm learning that there's even more of an art to it than I ever really realized. When you spund, you can close the valve and you can set the spring-loaded device, which is called big surprise, a spunding device. And the spunding device allows you to hold a pressure and at the same time evolve off the CO2, and along with it some of these off flavors like sulfur. Could be that you're getting some of these acetaldehyde, or that's probably not so much in the headspace. That's their green apple flavor, but you're getting some of your esters evolving away, those fruity notes. You got to strike that balance. And here's the really cool thing: the yeast are acting differently depending on how much pressure they're under. So you're doing lots of these different things. You're controlling how much they're making to begin with, the yeast, and then by allowing the venting to happen over a certain period of time, you're allowing so much to evolve away. Sulfur being the chief among those evolving compounds. And you're having to balance that with the need to capture just the right amount of CO2 such that at the end you don't have to add any. And spooning is an art form, and the Germans have perfected it. We've been doing it since day one. All of our tanks have.
What's the sulfur compound?
Mercaptan is the worst, but you're thinking about 3-MBT, 3-methyl-2-butene 1-thiol. That's the skunk one, and
That's
that comes from
big. That's going to be
hops.
heavier.
No, that comes from hops. That's a different conversation.
Oh, that's in a liquid?
No, we're talking about something different. You have SO2 and H2S.
Okay.
One of those is rotten egg. The other is burnt match.
H2S.
SO2 is the rotten egg, I think.
I thought it was H2S.
H2S is the burnt match. Let me have those backwards in real time. But either which you want to avoid, and you by spooning, you're allowing all this to happen all at once. You're allowing the carbonation to happen. You're controlling the evolution of sulfur compounds and those other fermentation byproducts. You're trying to strike a beautifully clean beer with just enough character to separate it out from what we would think of as a, quote, abomination of an American Pilsner, whatever the fuck that is, Budweiser. So Pilsners that name has been hijacked. And it's definitely not an American creation. We don't own that. But I would say today that Italian Pilsner is a thing, and that's sort of like a German Pilsner that's now been dry hopped. So you can go in and add hops later, and you get a really nice kind of an IPA aroma from some hops that are grown regionally. But guess what? The United States has now latched onto that the last couple of years, and we make what's called a West Coast Pilsner.
Of course
so we double that, all those aspects of that Italian Pilsner. And then now there's a New Zealand Pilsner. You can go on and on and on with this. These are different dry hop versions of the base style. They should. But yeah, that's spunding. It's a long description, but there's an art form to it. It's not just close the tank off, let it carbonate. There's a lot more to it. There's a whole book on the subject.
And you have that book, I assume.
Have that book.
Of course.
Yeah, I spooned it nightly.
So yep.
Oh my gosh.
I just can't wait to see Bobby's Amazon review. Incredible page turner. Could not put it down 5 stars.
Well, I think we've covered all I have, except that oak is an important. If you go back in time, the Pilsner Urquell still. And I think that in like 1,200 liter casks, they still make Pilsner Urquell.
That's weird though, because
Massive
aren't
sellers.
they in green bottles?
Okay. Let's back up a second.
I know.
We'll come back to that. They pitch line these barrels. So pitch is effectively pitch is like, isn't it just the tree sap? I think. So they line the inside of these barrels, so it doesn't actually take much barrel character on, and they're very airtight. But they sit in these picturesque cellars that go on for miles, apparently underground in the Pilsner Urquell Brewery, and they're all in these wooden fermentation secondary vessels, and then out of that they transfer out and they package them up. And they're not a small brewery. Just imagine that they're doing this in oak. It's blowing my mind. Well, green bottles. So now we are getting into that that 3-MBT conversation.
Yeah. This is where the Skunky Smell comes in.
Yeah. So green bottles, green is clear, effectively, for the light that the sun makes. So the light passes right through green glass into that beer, and it cleaves off sort of a functional arm of our isoalpha acids, and then through a couple of reactions creates the same compound that we associate with skunks. Not one like it, but the one. So you can make that's why all these green bottled beers, or clear ones, can be very skunky. And
this is why we freak out if we're in the beer garden and we see someone's glass in the sun. We'll scooch it over into the. Excuse me, sir. I'm just going to move this over into the shade.
And
I want to get some skunk smell.
We're not weird at all. I have yet to do this, but I'm imagining, and I've been told that getting a Pilsner Urquell, which you'll notice is largely canned now. There's
Smart.
still plenty of green glass, but it's largely canned now. Getting one of those side by side, I think that difference would be striking.
I've only seen it in bottles.
Have you? Okay, maybe I've just been keyed on the option of having it in cans.
Interesting fun fact about them. They did open fermentation until 1993.
What?
That is
That's
cool.
And they still do small batches of it just so people can try it.
Is that so they can
so
spund easier?
Oh,
Or
I
spooned?
digress. We all digress. Anyway, add that to decoction for words in brewing.
Decoction still wins.
Yeah. All right.
So then I suppose the last question would be, are you going to put Hildy on the menu? Because it hasn't been on the menu for months.
We just spooned it about 4 days ago, and now we're in the process of stepping it down, and that means in temperature. And as we step it down in temperature, we're trying to hit that.
Hold on, is a Pilsner a lager?
Of course.
Why am I just now asking this question?
Yeah, everything we've described was lager making 101.
Yeah, I know. I'm just now realizing I've never talked about her as one of our lagers because it's the German lagers, then we have the British ales, and then we've got Hildy.
Yeah, it's really the template for lager making. Period.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. So we're stepping it down. We're going to hold it at about 38 degrees for a few days. That's traditional by Pilsner Urquell Brewery. So we're following that. The yeast that we use is Augustiner, so we are using a German yeast with a Czech beer.
Can I just do a side story on Augustiner? Sure, have we talked about this on the podcast yet? Your obsession with Augustiner?
Yeah,
Augustiner, whatever it's called.
Augustiner from...
There was a brewery
Yep.
in Oklahoma that you worked at, and you were so obsessed with this yeast
Still am.
that you, during grad school, all the beers you would brew, it had to be this yeast. But then you couldn't get it for some reason.
You can't get it as a home brewer.
And
it
then
was
you
hard.
had to salvage it from the dregs of
I started
one
to
of
get
their...
it from that brewery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he would go on and on about it, and I wouldn't care. And yet you'd still talk about it.
I love Augustiner.
Oh, man.
Well, when you're a lager brewery, and we are.
But this is back in your homebrew days.
Yeah, we're a lager brewery because I think 65% of our production is lagers. And every lager brewery has a workhorse, and ours is that. When we're trying to make something clean, non-malt expressive, we'll use 3470, which is a Weihenstephan strain. And Weihenstephan's also a beautiful, beautiful yeast, but it's not nearly as expressive. You don't want to use that in Czech Pilsner. You want expression. And now, if you're making a German, maybe you do. Maybe you want to get out of the way, and a 3470 Weihenstephan would be a better choice. So that's our two weapons in our toolbox, or tools in our toolbox. I would say that if we had infinite money and tank space and all the things, I might actually look into using the Pilsner strain and play more with that. But remember, there's economics in running a brewery. You can't have a different
There
yeast
is?
every time. What's that?
There is?
I mean, a little bit, yeah. But if I were a home brewer, I would probably throw a Pilsner Urquell derivative into the Hildy and see how it turned out.
All right. Any more on Hildy?
I have a question on, is it laminated? The recipe.
Oh, that's always how we end these, isn't it?
You haven't changed Hildy that much. Though.
Well,
You
I'm
don't brew her that
exploring.
often.
I'm getting more options as far as floor malt availabilities, and I have my lead on another one that I'm even more intrigued by. So I'm still playing with. Remember, it really comes down to that one malt and that one hop, and I didn't talk enough about the hop, but I'm still messing around with that base malt, not really messing with our process or our recipe, because I think that there are some small regional differences.
The recipe is the ingredient.
You would think, but remember, nature throws a new one at you every year, even
guess
if you're
that's
buying
fair.
the same
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
So
Stupid harvest.
it does continue, and I don't think you'll ever meet a brewer that says, "Yep, happy with my Pilsner," because a Pilsner is never going to be mastered by anybody. That's the whole concept of a Pilsner. It's maddening.
All right. Well, that'll conclude this episode of Respecting the Beer. The producer of Respecting the Beer is David Kelso. Without David, there would not be a show. Please join the Facebook group to get updates between the episodes and to join us over on Patreon, where you can get things like all the bits that are edited out of the podcast, as well as opportunities for special beers. Links to both of these are in the show notes. And until next time, please remember to respect the beer.